Capcom.
その視界赤く染めて差し上げよう。いつでもいいぜ。かかってきな。Are you ready? Fight!
For many gamers today, what I'm about to say may sound utterly insane. There was a time and a place when video games were 2D. A time when fighting games ruled. Those were magical times indeed. And the king of fighting games during this period? Well, back then it was debated. You had titles like Mortal Kombat, Fatal Fury, and later on King of Fighters, as well as a slew of horrible copycat fighting games. But now, looking back, it's rather obvious that the true king was a title known as Street Fighter II. Growing up, I'd head to the local arcade with friends to duke it out almost every weekend. During this time, there were many iterations of Street Fighter II, such as Championship Edition and Super Street Fighter II Turbo. So many iterations, in fact, that many people began to ask, when in the world is Capcom going to make Street Fighter 3? Eventually, after titles like Street Fighter Zero came out, Capcom did get around to making Street Fighter 3, but the reception amongst many Street Fighter fans was lukewarm. When I first heard that Capcom was releasing Street Fighter 4, I was both excited and skeptical. After all, it had been years since Capcom had released a Street Fighter 2 video game. I became even more skeptical at the utter notion that Street Fighter 4 would be 3D. The only 3D fighting game I had ever enjoyed from Capcom was Rival Schools. But as time went on, and Capcom began releasing more and more footage of the game, showing it off at various events, and as I began to read first-hand impressions, I started to think that maybe, just maybe, Capcom could pull this thing off, reviving the Street Fighter formula that I had come to hold so near and dear to my heart. I've waited for months now with excitement to play this game. And the result? Street Fighter 4 is simply the best fighting game to come along in years. It takes most of the elements that made Street Fighter great, such as 2D gameplay, and combines it with modern-day 3D graphics that are simply some of the most gorgeous and colorful we've seen in years. To top it all off, the game has a great soundtrack that will please, if not exceed, old-school fans' expectations. If you've ever played any Street Fighter, you know the basic drill. Very few moves have been changed, and all in all, Street Fighter 4 plays a lot like its Street Fighter 2 big brother. But there are new elements here as well, such as unblockable attacks that will keep you on your toes, and ultra attacks that build as you take damage. Of course, the super moves are here as well, building as you do attacks. You can also use your super meter to throw variations of your special moves, many of which are unblockable or cancel other moves out. The gist of it is that Street Fighter 4 is easy to pick up and play, but to compete against the elite is going to take a lot of practice. If we have one complaint about the gameplay, it's the fact that there is no air blocking. This will continue to be debated for a long time, but all of us here feel that taking out air blocking is really taking a step back. Even so, with all the new gameplay elements, even seasoned Street Fighter 2 vets are going to have to rethink old school tactics. The game's weak point is probably the story. The anime cutscenes, while awesome, just don't feel like they provide enough. They're well done, we just would have liked a lot more, seeing as how we all love the Street Fighter 2 anime movie. It is cool how many of the stories are interwoven together, but again, we would have just liked a lot more. Also, the game's final boss Seth is not only cheap, but incredibly stupid looking. He's like Pyron from Darkstalkers, but simply not cool. The graphics are just beautiful and take full advantage of the next generation hardware. Stages have tons going on in the background as you fight it out with your opponent. My favorite stage is probably the diner, where you have all these lowriders bouncing up and down. In some ways, I do wish there were more stages, but perhaps extra downloadable content will fill this desire in the future. The music feels old school yet modern at the same time. Honestly, there isn't even one track I dislike, and the opening is something you're going to be humming for a long, long time. Speaking of the sound, the game does have both Japanese and English audio. The dub isn't too bad, but most older fans are going to switch a majority of the characters to Japanese audio. One of the game's nicest touches is in fact the ability to actually toggle each character voice between Japanese or English. So for example, you can have Rue speak Japanese and Ken speak English. It's a very subtle but nice touch that adds a lot to the game. Training mode is decent enough, but new players are probably still going to have some trouble putting it all together. Still, those who take the plunge and decide to put enough into Street Fighter 4 will indeed be rewarded. The game also has a challenge mode which includes time attack, survival, and trial challenges. It's a nice addition, but it's really nothing new for a fighting game. Street Fighter 4's online mode is outstanding. While it's taken us a while to connect to players for matches on Xbox Live, we haven't experienced lag on any match we've played, and that in itself is an amazing accomplishment, because it really does give the game an arcade feel. Nothing in the world beats fighting against a human opponent, and when you win, oh, when you win, it's something that simply cannot be put into words. Street Fighter 4 is an exceptional game. For those who have never played a Street Fighter video game before, this is an awesome title to start with. For fans like myself, who have been playing Street Fighter games since the early 90s, you won't be disappointed. Many would argue that Street Fighter 2 started the fighting game genre, but most would agree that it is without a doubt what made fighting games so popular throughout the world during the 90s. So perhaps now Street Fighter 4 will be the title to reignite the genre. Either way, it's a game that should simply not be missed.